Alexander the Great, in an Islamicized version, for the Shah of Iran, who had conquered the city of Herat against the Uzbeks. So here is the Shah of Iran, and in the 16th century, if you were a Shi'i and you rallied to the Shah of Iran, then you would wear a turban wrapped around a very tall skull cap, which was known in Persian as the Taj-i Haydari, the crown of Ali, with 12 grooves. Guess why it has 12 grooves? 12 imams, of course. So here are the Uzbeks, and they're wearing the typical Sunni turban, which is much lower with a smaller skull cap. But at the same, even though this is supposed to represent the story of Alexander and Darius, the artist represents contemporary warriors, and this gives you a very good idea of the constant struggles for possession of the city of Herat in the 15th and 16th century. And you get a very good idea of what's happening. A nomad group invades, it conquers, it holds the city, the lords become kings themselves, and then they have to defend the city against new nomad groups. And you have this constant pressure that Ibn Khaldun describes so beautifully. Herat held against the nomads in battles very much like this one, opposing the Shah of Iran agricultural settlement against the ferocious horse nomads from the Central Asian steppe, the Uzbeks, before they became such masters of Samarkand that they settled down in turn. Next. And this is how these traditions were perpetuated into the 20th and 21st century. This is also played in ex-Soviet Central Asia. Sorry, yes?
About the 2 slides ago, did you mean the musicians blind for that purpose, or they would only hire a blind musician to do that job?
Probably only hired a blind musician, just as they often had blind men to serve to call to prayer from the tops of minarets so that they couldn't see down into the courtyards. Also, if you were born blind in this type of traditional society, then this was a professional outlet. Become a musician or become someone who calls to prayer. Have you all heard, know this game on horseback? Buzkashi.
Yeah.
They play it in Uzbekistan, Tajikistan too.
Is this the game where you chase someone on horseback, and if you win, you get to kiss them?
You get to cut his head off? You got close. It's a kind of polo.
Goat carcass?
It's a goat, yes, and they actually, it started out with a goat carcass, and they decided a goat was too light. So they use a calf, cut off its head, they cut off its hooves, and it serves as the ball. You leave the carcass in the middle of a circle. They try to organize it in the 20th century with teams, but traditionally it's every man for himself. On horseback, you ride up, you have to fight off all your opponents, reach down from the saddle, which means hooking your leg around it's known as the cantle of the saddle, the high part of the saddle behind, and you reach down, and you have to have a stirrup for that, with a very high heel to keep your foot from slipping from the stirrup. You reach all the way down to the ground, you lift up the carcass by a leg, you hook it underneath your stirrup leather, and you ride as fast as you can, because everybody else is chasing right after you to tear it away from you. And the first person who can carry the carcass into the circle, chalked into the ground, maybe 2 kilometers away, wins. It's a spectacular thing to see. And the best way to watch it is to be on horseback yourself, because not all the people that you see on horseback are actually players. Some of them are supporters, cheerleaders, serving to screen their favorite player from the other horsemen. So that was a lot of fun to do. Did you ever play that?
I've
Never played that? I was able to ride in one of those things as a spectator on a horseback, which was a lot of fun. Okay, here, take the next one. Yeah, there's another vision of it. Pretty spectacular, isn't it? Here pretty much in the same world as in that 16th century picture. Next. Yeah. He has the calf right here. See it?
Oh, it's okay.
It's hanging here, and he has his whip between his teeth.
So what is the game called again?
Buzkashi, meaning goat pulling. You have what I think is rather top sociological theories that Afghan politics are basically a game of buzkashi. And you even have what I think are ridiculous books called Buzkashi, The Secret of Afghan Politics. And yeah, every guy with a whip between his teeth and reaching for the calf himself. No. It's more serious than that. But anyway, next. Okay, we're coming closer to Herat now. Have you noticed that given how high we are, these oases are not palm trees, but mulberry tree, poplar tree, apple tree, so that in autumn you get New England or Northern European colors in the middle of the desert. And does anybody recognize this dog?
Afghan.
That's the real Afghan hound. Traditionally, Afghan villages were surrounded with dogs. In fact, these dogs were so ferocious, they would just go right for your throat. They were designed, they were bred for their ferocity, for their capacity to keep wolves away from sheep. Their ears would be cut so that wolves could not catch them by the ears. You've all seen what just looks like a caricature in cartoons, but it really had a purpose. You know, a huge mastiff with a collar around its neck with spikes on it. That's not a decoration. That was designed once upon a time to prevent wolves from catching the dog by the throat. In Afghanistan, these dogs that surrounded a village or a nomad camp could run as fast as a galloping horse. If you were on a horse, you would have to fight them off with your whip, but you couldn't shoot one. If you shot them, the villagers would shoot at you. You were just expected to be able to hold off a dog. If you walked, then normally you had a big stick and you just had to circle the stick like this until you reached the village and called upon the people to call off their dogs. So it was really a very dangerous part of the world to walk around it all by yourself. On horseback, what was a lot of fun was that you knew that if you fell off the horse or your horse stumbled and threw you, you were dead. Unless you were able to shoot your way out of it. One of the reasons why we always carried guns when we traveled as archaeologists in the area before 1978 was in case we recognized that a dog had rabies. So we could shoot it first. Then, during the Soviet occupation, because these dogs created such a ruckus and made it so difficult for mujahideen to move from one village to another, most of these dogs were shot. They're beginning to come back now in the nomad camps. You must recognize this. You remember those? Sagoro namonin kemaro nagira. That's what you had to call out all the time, right? Don't leave the dogs. Prevent them from getting me. It was always an adventure to travel around in the backcountry. Next. Now this typical village in very close to Herat city, as you will see, has these domes with what looks like a chimney, always facing in the same direction. The wind in the summertime blows for 130 days. It's known as the wind of 130 days. It blows at about 60 kilometers an hour from the east. So this would be the east here. And these are known as wind catchers. It's natural air conditioning. Catch the wind and channel the wind inside the mud hut, and the wind just circulates and airs out the house. Today in Herat, the drug lords are putting up high-rises and blocking the access of wind to the traditional houses, making them unlivable in the summertime, and so provoking the disintegration of the traditional city. But they could care less. Next. Now this gives you an idea of the force of the wind, raising up these dust devils in the oasis of Herat in summertime. This, I hope, gives you an idea of what I meant by the wall which rises. You come from the Iranian plateau, you reach